This is BBC World News Today. Reporting from Washington, I'm Jane O'Brien. The headlines.
You are acting in a riotous manner. All people must leave the area immediately.
Tear gas and arrests in Portland and other American cities as protesters say they're not prepared to accept the election result. President Obama appeals for calm.
The American instinct has never been to find isolation in opposite corners. It is to find strength in our common creed, to forge unity from our great diversity.
It comes after mixed messages from President-elect Trump. He accused the media of inciting professional protesters, but then said he loved their passion. Also ahead, thousands more people flee the fighting around Mosul as the UN accuses Islamic State of carrying out atrocities on civilians.
The victims were dressed in orange clothes marked in red with the words, "Traitors and agents of the ISF." Their bodies were then hung on electrical poles in several areas in Mosul city.
With nothing on my tongue but hallelujah.
A unique voice and songs which inspired generations of performers. Musicians around the world paid tribute to Leonard Cohen. President Obama has called for calm and unity after a second night of anti-Trump protests and riots in one city. Donald Trump initially blamed what he called professional protesters, but in a later tweet he said he loved the passion the demonstrators were showing for their country. He's also tweeted that he'll soon be choosing the people who will run his new government. Our North America correspondent Nick Bryant reports from New York.
Present!
At the end of this momentous week, joyous for so many, traumatic for others, America remembered the fallen heroes of war. President Obama led this national ceremonial for those who died to preserve the country's freedoms, for those who fought to uphold its democratic ideals. And in a plea for unity, he called for people to respect that tradition.
Veterans Day often follows a hard-fought political campaign, an exercise in the free speech and self-government that you fought for. It often lays bare disagreements across our nation. But the American instinct has never been to find isolation in opposite corners. It is to find strength in our common creed, to forge unity.
Many veterans at this parade in New York voted for Donald Trump, and many who didn't are prepared still to salute the country's incoming commander-in-chief.
He has been showing that he's just not the talk. He's walking the walk, and we're very happy about that.
You think he's fit to be commander-in-chief?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Did you vote for Donald Trump?
No.
How do you feel about him becoming the president-elect?
Well, he got a right to be there. Anybody have a right to be there. Let's see what he do with it.
This election has exposed such deep divisions between people of different races, between people of different classes, between people who live in the countryside and people who live in the cities. The United States of America, the very name of this country, seems at odds with the mood of this country. Fires of fury on the streets of Portland, Oregon. A West Coast city where you wouldn't ordinarily expect to see trouble. And there have been nightly protests in major cities across the country. Young people especially outraged at the election of Donald Trump. He took to Twitter to give his first response to the protests. Just had a very open and successful presidential election. Now professional protesters, incited by the media, are protesting. Very unfair. But 9 hours later, he was sounding more conciliatory. Love the fact that the small groups of protesters last night have passion for our great country. We will all come together and be proud. But on a day that marks an armistice, the political hostilities in America are far from over. Nick Bryant, BBC News, New York.
I'm joined now by Ed Rogers, who is a Republican Party analyst. Ed, we saw those pictures there. Yeah. President Obama has appealed for calm. What can Donald Trump say?
Well, not much. I mean, the most important thing for Trump, given his nature, is to be cool, calm, and collected. Not let this irritate him, not let him feel like he has to lash out, He doesn't have to comment much at all. This will burn out over time. He's got to assume that. He's got other things to do.
But having said that, I mean, these people obviously feel that they are left out of the protest, of the process. They feel that they cannot accept Mr. Trump at the moment. He must be able to say something that would encourage them to get behind him, unite. Well, again, that will happen over time. I mean, my message to these people would be something more like get over it. These are the same people who, by the way, I'm sure were the most agitated when there was some suggestion from the Trump campaign is they may have a question about the results of the election. Would you say that if there were anti-Clinton protesters on the streets right now, if she'd won? I've been in politics a long time. I have the saying, you win some, you lose a lot. And when you lose, you have your couple of days of grief, but then you put your shoulder to the wheel and you push hard, and you wish the next president or whatever person has been elected to whatever office, you wish them well. You can be loyal opposition, and you have a role to play in that regard, but taking it to the streets is a little much. Well, talking about putting the shoulder to the wheel, Mr. Trump has a lot of work ahead of him. He's selecting his first cabinet. Do you think the transition team is ready for this? Well, ready or not, here it comes. And no, I don't think that, I think everybody was so surprised, including a lot of the Trump forces. I know people that are on the transition team, and maybe they didn't have all of the zeal and the intensity that they would have if they really and truly thought they were marching toward a victory. So yeah, they're probably behind a little bit. Who should we be watching out for? I mean, there are some big names there. Rudy Giuliani, for one, former mayor of New York. Well, the people that are around Trump the closest are probably each in their own way eligible to go into the government. So yeah, keep an eye on Governor Chris Christie, keep an eye on Rudy Giuliani, keep an eye on former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, some other the campaign people. I mean, it's not hard to see who it's going to be, but the fact of the matter is, again, I've been through this process a lot. There's a lot more people who want something than are going to get something. You know all these people quite well. To one degree or another, some of them, yeah. But you know how they work. Yeah. How do you think Mr. Trump is going to work with his new cabinet? Is he going to be a go-it-alone style? Is he going to be a team player? What do you think? Well, I don't know Trump, but he's a delegator, and he is used to having a variety of experts working on a common project. The same people, when you build a building, the same people that do the infrastructure and steel are different than the people that do the plumbing. The plumbing people are different than the people that do the finishings. And so as an orchestrator and as someone who has to build something and see it through, I think that's a pretty good lesson for a president. I think that's a pretty good skill set for a president, rather than just be another politician just used to talking. I mean, he has real deadlines and real orchestration of a lot of different expertise. And of course, that's good for a president. And as along with the plumbing and the carpentry, they've also got to govern. Ed Thomas, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Great to be here. Thanks. Well, for more on the US election, of course, you can go to our website where there's much more background and plenty of features to keep you going, including this collection of photographs from Donald Trump's meeting with President Obama on Thursday. There's full analysis of their encounter at bbc.com/news. Now, in other news, the United Nations says it has new evidence of atrocities being carried out by the Islamic State group in and around Mosul as Iraqi forces close in on the city. The UN Human Rights Office in Geneva quoted sources from the region saying that IS had shot and killed scores of civilians, accusing them of treason.
Just over the past few days, reports have emerged that ISIL appears to be continuing to carry out killings based on decisions of its self-appointed courts. On Tuesday, ISIL reportedly shot and killed 40 civilians in Mosul city, after accusing them of treason and collaboration with the ISF. The victims were dressed in orange clothes marked in red with the words, "Traitors and agents of the ISF." Their bodies were then hung on electrical poles in several areas in Mosul city.
Our correspondent Richard Galpin, who's in Erbil in northern Iraq, gave us more detail about these reports.
According to the UN, they're saying that more than 60 people, civilians, have either been shot dead or hanged so far this week. These are people, as you say, they accuse of being traitors, either because they've directly collaborated with the Iraqi security forces or simply 20 of them because they had mobile phones and SIM cards and therefore automatically come under suspicion that they may have been communicating either with security forces or with friends and relatives who might pass on sensitive information. So more than 60 people killed so far this week. And I think it is very much a reflection of the fact that Iraqi special forces are now moving gradually closer towards the centre of Mosul itself, which of course is the head city of the so-called Caliphate, which Islamic State set up back in 2014.
Well, large and increasingly angry crowds of people in India have spent the day queuing at banks to try to deposit or exchange banknotes that have suddenly become obsolete. Yogita Lamai has more from Mumbai.
For another day, people gathered at banks. Many here were standing in line for more than 7 hours, unwilling to step away for a quick bite for fear of losing their spot. Among them, a group of women, mostly housewives and domestic workers, all carrying bundles of cash they've been putting aside for years, small amounts of money that are their life savings.
If we suddenly need to travel or if there is a medical emergency, then who will have the time to come to a bank and withdraw money? So we keep our savings at home.
I worry that I might fall ill or my grandchildren might get sick. And then I will need some cash at hand for medical treatment. That's why I keep money at home rather than in the bank. But now most of those notes can't be used.
It was the same story at banks across Mumbai. Several ATMs have closed down because they've run out of banknotes already. The reason why there's such a rush to withdraw some money is because India is still largely a cash-based economy. A large number of people here prefer to pay for things in cash over using bank cards. Many shops too deal in cash. Vegetable sellers like Muhammad Aslam don't have credit or debit card machines. And since the government banned the banknotes, his business has taken a hit.
People don't have cash to shop at my stall, and so I'm not able to sell any vegetables. They end up rotting and then I have to throw them away.
The government expected that people would be inconvenienced for a few days. But there's already a shortage of new notes at banks. And without a ready supply of legal cash, it's unclear how long people will have to wait. Yogita Lamai, BBC News, Mumbai.
Well, back to our top story, of course, which is the election. And Catty Kay joins me now to look ahead. Catty, exciting times for Mr. Trump. He's got to get a cabinet together in lickety-split time, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got to go from campaigning, which is one thing, to actually governing. And the priority for his campaign now is to make it appear to stabilise markets and to reassure allies around the world. This is a group that's in control, that they know what they're doing, that they're organised, that they have a team and that they've got a bench, and particularly on some of those foreign policy positions, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defence, Homeland Security, they want to make sure they project the strength that Donald Trump talked about during the campaign. So Mr. Trump is there in Trump Tower in New York today. His transition team is with him. There have been some movements in the transition team. Rudy Giuliani, we understood, turned up. Apparently the reports are that Chris Christie, who'd been heading the transition team, has been replaced by the Vice President-elect, Mike Pence, but all the signs are that they want to move on this fast.
A lot of nations around the world are looking at this. Some of them are extremely worried. The EU is concerned about what this will mean for relations, trade relations, obviously. Which post do you think is going to be the most important at this very critical juncture? Is it going to be Secretary of State?
Well, for the last few days, Jane, I've been saying don't listen to what Donald Trump says, watch what he does. If you want to get a guide as to what kind of president he's going to be. And I think the first thing that he will do is appoint some key members of his cabinet. And the one I'm going to be watching the most closely is actually his chief of staff, because there's a tussle going on at the moment between a more traditional Republican member who's the head of the Republican National Committee, and between Steve Bannon, who's the head of Breitbart, who's been the chairman of his campaign, who is seen by many people in America as being far more conservative, more right-wing. Who wins that battle will tell us a lot about whether Mr. Trump is going to be more of a deal maker or more of a divider.
I spoke to Ed Rogers a few minutes ago about his management style. I'm keen to find out what you think about it. Can he work with people, or are we going to see this person, as we saw in the campaign, who just goes it alone, trusts his gut and will run the country like that?
He's about to be President of the United States. He has to work with people. This is not a job that you can do by yourself. George W. Bush, famous for not being massively interested in reading briefings, used to sit up until 11 o'clock at night reading those briefing books. Mr. Trump is going to get into office and realize there is an awful lot he has to do, both domestically and internationally. He is going to have a team with them, and he's going to have to rely on them and delegate to them. There are some decisions only the president can make, but it's very important that he has a team around him that he trusts enough to delegate to them. He's going to have to learn to do that.
Now, there are protests, of course. A lot of people deeply unhappy with the election results. Across American cities, we've seen people turning out to demonstrate against Mr. Trump. What can he say that isn't in a tweet that will reassure them that he's listening?
Well,
Is he listening?
There are calls on him from Democrats, and Harry Reid, who is the most senior Democrat in the Republican, he's in the party, is retiring, but he's been very blunt about Mr. Trump and said, look, this all lies at Mr. Trump's doorstep. He must come out and try to unite the country, and he has to do it in some kind of speech. You're getting the same kind of calls from the New York Times, the Washington Post editorials saying that he has to address these divisions in the country. And for those people who feel they might be second-class citizens in Mr. Trump's presidency, he has to reach out to them. He's not done that so far, except with his rather mixed messages on his tweets. We will see if he does that. I think at the moment his priority is probably getting that cabinet in position. That's the most important thing he has to do.
Well, as I said, a lot of work ahead, and I get the feeling that they were caught as much unawares as we were by the result. Catty Kay, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Now, delivery drivers for the internet giant Amazon here in Britain are regularly working illegal hours and sometimes receive less than the minimum wage, according to a BBC investigation. The chair of the Business Select Committee, Ian Wright, says that Amazon could be called to answer questions about the working practices. Amazon, which employed the drivers through an agency, says it is committed to ensuring they are driving safely and legally and are fairly compensated. Seb Choudhury reports.
As the world's biggest online retailer, Amazon is at the forefront of the e-commerce revolution. And this depot in Bristol is the sort of place your parcels come on their way to your home. But what are the conditions like for the drivers who bring them to your door?
I had to drive quick. I had to.
You have to be fast all the time.
We heard worrying allegations about the working conditions for drivers at one agency, AHC Services, one of the many agencies who provide drivers to Amazon Logistics. So we sent a reporter to get a job there.
It's not a job for everybody. Like some people, you've got to be prepared to put your foot down a little bit in some cases.
He found that drivers are expected to deliver 150 to 200 parcels in a typical day.
Mine are D's, E's and G's.
Our undercover reporter opted to hire a van from the agency. After deductions, including for the van and insurance, in his first week he earned the equivalent of an hourly rate of £2.60. In the second week, he earned £4.76 per hour. A few drivers who know their routes well were content with the job, but many others told him they had to speed to get all their work done.
They drive like absolute idiots because they just see we've got to get these parcels delivered or we won't get paid.
Cody Cooper worked for 18 months as a supervisor for AHC Services and left late last year.
One guy, he hadn't had one single day off for 3 months, and I got more concerned when I received a call from a driver one afternoon and he told me he fell asleep at the wheel.
He was working 7 days a week to start off with. It was long hours, 12, 15-hour days.
Yeah, sometimes we didn't get home until 11, 12 o'clock at night.
AHC Services told us that they take road safety and the welfare of its contracted drivers extremely seriously and have recently taken a number of steps to improve their ways of working. They say they provide drivers with the flexibility to choose when they work. We asked the MP Ian Wright what he made of our investigation.
I've got no doubt that the Select Committee and I would want to bring forward Amazon to our committee to say what's going on here.
Amazon said in a statement, "We're committed to ensuring that people contracted by our independent delivery providers are fairly compensated, follow all applicable rules and drive safely. We expect drivers to receive a minimum of £12 per hour before bonuses and incentives." Seb Chowdhury, BBC News, Bristol.
Tributes have been pouring in for the Canadian songwriter and poet Leonard Cohen, who has died at the age of 82. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Cohen's work resonated across generations, describing him as one of the most influential and enduring musicians ever. David Silito looks back on his life.
You were talking so brave and so sweet.
Leonard Cohen never claimed to be much of a singer, but what he offered were some of pop's most elegant songs. When it came to late nights, broken hearts, disappointment.
And that was New York.
I loved his car, which he wore like a snail shell everywhere.
The young Leonard Cohen was a poet. This Jewish boy from Montreal found it was a way to win a woman's heart. It didn't make any money, though.
In hindsight, it seems like a mad decision that I was going to rectify my economic situation by becoming a singer.
Amongst the 60s set, he was the older one, wiser, and those beautiful doomed romances he had plenty to sing about.
So long,
His songs were serious, often a bit bleak, but other singers loved them.
Well, I heard there was a secret chord.
Take Hallelujah.
David played and it pleased the Lord.
Poet, songwriter, and even for a while, Buddhist monk.
Oh, people, I've been here before.
That is until money problems forced him back on stage.
Look at me, Leonard.
Reminding us of what made him great. The dark, musical poetry of Leonard Cohen.
Wonderful music there, and I am an enormous fan of Leonard Cohen. OK, well, let's remind you of our top story again. As Donald Trump prepares to step into the Oval Office, migrant families across the country are worried about what his presidency might mean for them. An estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants live in the US. Lourdes Villanueva works for an organisation that helps to educate many children of migrant workers in Florida.
We still cannot even comprehend what just happened. That's not who we are. This country is not that. My name is Lourdes Villanueva. The children that we serve here, they are children of migrant farm workers. So they're here while the parents are out there picking strawberries. I stayed up and I watched to the last minute. So I knew that was going to be heavy on their mind.
How were the parents feeling this morning when they dropped off their kids?
I think they were like kind of concerned, you know, with the election and what's going to come of them.
Square, for equal size. In one family, you may have an undocumented person, a resident, a citizen children. So any day, that may change, that the family is not a full family anymore.
Arriba, abajo. Arriba, abajo.
The families have lived under that fear for years. So with the election of Donald Trump as the new president, the fear has just really reignited all over again because he really has been so abrasive in threatening that this is what's going to happen the first day that he's in office.
The kids, they're so afraid of what's going to happen to their parents. And when I woke up this morning, first thing I'm like, our families, the children, you know, words can't, I can't even explain how I feel.
Especially for children, it's very hard to explain. Many times I do say this is just mental abuse. It's politics. It is not taken into account that politics affect people. it splits families. As adults, if they're sent back home, okay, they're back home. But the children are going to be lost because over there they will not have the opportunity to go to school. And it's a place that they don't know, they have never been. They're families, they're people, they're human beings. They're not just those illegals, those criminals. Like, no, come and see what these people are doing. And then you tell me they're criminals. They're working to support their families.
And a reminder of our main news today. President Obama has called for calm and unity after a second night of anti-Trump protests. And Donald Trump tweeted that he'll soon be choosing the people who will run his new government. That's it from the programme. Next we have the weather, but for now from me, Jane O'Brien, and the rest of us, goodbye.